you are here to try to decide whether to take this class. And so what we're going to do today is talk about why you might want to take it, what the requirements are. And then I think there's a lot of you that are still trying to get into the class, and so we're going to talk about enrollment issues and how you might have one last chance to get in. Our head GSI will be in charge of that. Okay, so I think the best motivation for taking this class is just to try to read the newspaper. It's astonishing the number of things that come up in the newspaper that without any economic training, you wouldn't know what in the world they're talking about. Just one of them just recently. The FTC is opening an antitrust investigation against Google. How many of you knew about this? Google's perhaps going to be accused of breaking the law having to do with monopoly control. How can that be? Everybody loves Google. So you should be asking yourself, what in the world is an antitrust investigation? What are antitrust laws? Antitrust laws shortly are laws that prevent the growth and exercise of monopoly power. So we're going to study in this class why it is that we need laws to protect us from the growth and exercise of monopoly power, what exactly those laws are, what they allow and what they don't allow, and how that's played out in a variety of situations. You probably remember Microsoft was also slapped with a large antitrust lawsuit. So it really seems like firms that become very successful, we as a country have a very skitsy position towards them. We start suing them. Why is that? We're going to study that. That's one of the main things that microeconomics has to say about the world. I don't know if any of you saw this, but the July jobs report, number of jobs that were created in July, which is the last month that we have data on, actually was higher than expected. How many of you saw this? No, very few people. It was lost among all the disaster reporting about the downgrade of our national mortgage rating, credit rating. And it happened at exactly the same time, and it just kind of slipped under the radar. But this might actually mean that we're slightly pulling out of this recession we've been in, this bad economic time. This time we've had since 2008 has been the worst since the Great Depression of the 30s. It's possible we're going to go into a second recession, a double dip. There are signs that indicate that might be happening, it might not. What we're going to study in this course is what causes job growth, what causes unemployment, and importantly, what can we do about it? What steps can the government take to try to stabilize our economy and help us grow out of the recessions that we sometimes end up in? You've probably seen practically all the presidential candidates have some plan or another on what we're supposed to do about the deficit and about jobs. Hopefully this course will help you to evaluate those and make your decisions on what you think, which candidates are making meaningful statements and which ones aren't. This is my favorite. This is the last one I'm going to talk about. China convicts an American as a trash smuggler. You know the trash that we throw away, we have to pay someone to come pick it up. We pay the the trash utility to pick it up, and then they have to pay someone to get rid of it, okay? This enterprising entrepreneur actually bought a boat, an enormous ship, and was paid he promised to get rid of trash, and he put it into the ship and hauled it over to China and just offloaded it into some harbor in China in hopes of not getting caught. Well, of course, that breaks Chinese law too. But what it shows is the incredible amount of money that's to be made in simply dealing with the trash that we create as an economy. Guess what was in the ship? It wasn't just any old trash. These were soiled baby diapers. The entire thing was filled with soiled baby. Can you imagine the Chinese official who opened the hull and the smell came out? Anyway, the act of living, the act of having children actually creates pollution. We need to somehow deal with this. We create pollution in all forms of our living, and we need to figure out how to handle that in our economy. So that's what we're going to study in this course, how to make the right decisions about the degree of pollution that we need to have or want to have, how to protect the environment at the same time that we keep our economy growing. That's a main topic of economics and one of the topics that we're going to discuss in this class. You can go on, practically all the paper and newspapers are filled with topics that have to do with things that we're going to study in this class. Okay, so back to the mundane issue of what actually is economics. This is the way our textbook defines it, and practically all textbooks define economics as a field. It's the study of how economies use scarce resources to produce valuable commodities and distribute them among people. It's a very broad definition, but it can be broken down into three parts. what goods are produced, what resources are used to produce them, and then who gets to consume those goods. Those are basically the issues that we're trying to decide how to do and how does it happen in an economic system. The key word in this definition is the word scarce. This is a central concept to the study of economics, and in some sense can be considered the defining characteristic of the study of economics. We start with the concept that there's scarcity. There is a fixed number of people in the country who can work, a fixed number of hours that we have available to doing work. There's fixed resources that are available for us to produce goods and services. After we've produced those goods and services, there's some fixed amount of that that has to be distributed among people. And so there is less of everything than we would possibly want. There's not an infinite supply of everything. What that implies is that we as a society and we as individual people need to make choices. We have to choose how to use these scarce resources. If they're used in one way, they can't be used in another way. And so we need to make those choices meaningfully. We need to understand how to make them appropriately, okay? And understand the choices that are implicit with any economic system that we set up. What the making of choices among scarce resources implies is that there is no free lunch. Everything has an opportunity cost. For example, you come to this lecture. You didn't have to pay any money to come in, and so it seems like it's a free lecture. But you could have done something else with your time. You could have drunk a cappuccino with some of your friends. You could have studied for another class. You could go to another class. And so there was some alternative use of your time that you could have spent this time at, and instead you chose to come here and have this class. The opportunity cost of this class is the cost of the value of whatever else you would have done with your time otherwise. Everything has an opportunity cost, and in a sense, the explicit representation of opportunity cost and the full follow-through of the implications of that is the concept of economics. That's what we study. What this has led to is economics being called the dismal science. How many of y'all have heard that? Yes. I think Thomas Carlyle was the person who coined that phrase, but it's now caught on. Everyone refers to economics as the dismal science. Well, I hate to be considered a dismal scientist. But it's based in the idea that it's the study of a system that can't satisfy all needs. We have more people with more wants than are available to meet with our scarce resources. So it's a kind of a recognition of the dismalness that comes out of recognition of scarcity. I actually see the field in a much more, what would you say, happy light. Recognition of scarcity is simply recognition of the starting point. It's like an alcoholic who finally admits they're alcoholic. That's the road to recovery. For economists, recognition of scarcity is actually the way we understand how to create more abundance. How do we get more goods and services out of our scarce resources, and how do we allocate them in a more appropriate way to give more benefits to more people? So another way to look at economics is, instead of this definition that was given earlier, it's the creation of abundance, the science of how we create more with our scarce resources. How do we produce more? How do we have opportunities for mutually advantageous trade, where I can give you some of my goods, you can give me some of your goods, through a market system perhaps, and we both be better off? And how do new products and processes get created? This is actually the more appropriate view of the field throughout history. Our economic welfare has grown tremendously in the last 200-300 years. It's just phenomenal what we as a society have been able to accomplish. And it's not with an increase in the amount of land available. The land's always been there. And the resources available. We have more population, but our economy has grown much more than that. It's actually through being better able to create things out of what we've got. And that's what we're trying to do throughout this whole course. You need to keep remembering that that's the goal, that that's what we're trying to do. So you can redefine this as economics is how to create more benefits with our existing scarce resources. Okay, with that as a kind of pep talk, I want to go over, well, just to make clear, microeconomics, we're going to have this class divided into two parts. Microeconomics has to do with the behavior of individual firms and consumers. Okay? Later, if you continue on in economics, you'll take an entire course on microeconomics. And then macroeconomics is the behavior of the economy as a whole. Okay? It should be the case that the two are interrelated. However, at our level of understanding of the macroeconomy, there's not that much relation between the two. As you'll see, the kinds of forces that operate and determine what happens in a macroeconomy are, in a sense, independent. They're not independent, but if you try to apply this concepts of microeconomics writ large for the macroeconomy, you can go really wrong, okay? And so usually these two concepts are divided, and the next generation of you people can figure out better ways for us to reconcile the two parts of economics. Again, later, if you continue in economics, you could take classes just in macroeconomics. We're going to cover both because the purpose of this course is to give you an idea of what the field has to say, what it is that you might want to be studying when you go forward in economics, and whether you want to do this as your profession or your major. Okay, so what are the course requirements? I want to say we've got a lot of resources available for this class. There's a lot of people involved, and you should take advantage of everything. First, I want to say, this is a good time to start, our head GSI is going to be in charge of all enrollment issues and other issues that arise during the course. Zhao Yu, where is she? There, over here. And I think now's a good time to just talk about enrollment. There's a few, anyway, you go ahead.
Okay.
Whatever you want to say.
Is it open?
Is that on?
It's on. Yeah, okay. So my name is Xiao Yu, and I'm the person who handling the enrollment of this whole class. I know we have a lot of students on the waiting list, and a lot of them want to get in. So first, let me explain a few things. For the people who are already in this class, please attend the first week sections. If you don't show up for both of the two sections, you will be dropped. So the people who are in the waiting list will get in. So make sure you attend the first two sections, which is in the first week. And for the people who are in the waiting list, if you are pretty high, so you might get in the class just by other students dropping the class. And for other students who are not in the waiting list or have some reason that you don't get in regularly registered class in phase 1, we have a separate procedure we call it applying for the CEC code. So I have the form here. I will leave a few copies in the desk and also a few copies in the hallway. And you can also reach me in my office at Evans 5082. Basically, most of the time in the first 2 weeks, I'll be there. So you can also feel free to email me. My email address is on the website, right? Yeah. So you can apply for the code if you think you have some priority getting the class. For example, you need the class to graduate to satisfy some requirement of your department, so we can consider that. Just want to make sure that we reserve 20 seats. So that's why you see there are only 700 people getting class while we have 720 in the class limit because we reserve 20 seats for those students. If we don't have those students, all the extra seat will go to the waiting list, so people will get a chance to get in. Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Everyone's happy with enrollment?
Wow, that's good.
First year ever. Thank you. Okay. We also have, each of you has a GSI that is in your assigned section. The GSIs are co-teachers in this class with me. As you probably know by now, this class has 2 hours of lecture a week and 2 hours of section a week. And so fully half of the instruction will go on in sections. And your GSIs will be covering handling those. I think you will find the sections to be very enjoyable and productive. I have given material for the GSIs to cover in each section so that every GSI will be covering that material. But then also the GSIs, I've encouraged them to bring their own material because I really do think economics is a very personal topic. It's a personal subject. You have your own views on things, and it's a way to organize your thinking. It's not a mandated right-wrong concept. And so the more the GSIs can do that in their sections and let you do it also, the better. So there's time in section for material that's beyond what I am requiring be covered there also. The required material in the sections will also be on the exam, so it's important you go to section or you won't do well on the exams. For example, I think the first topic we're covering in section is the production possibility frontier. It's a really important and useful concept. We're not going to talk about it at all in lecture, and it's important that you be in section for it. And in regard to that, I'm going to skip the rest of these for now and talk about grading. The grading is 5% for the 5 problem sets, 25% for the midterms, and 45% for the final exam. There's 2 midterms. Importantly, all grading will be by GSI. Okay, so each GSI will grade his or her own students, develop his or her own curve, and assign the grades. It'll all be under my supervision. I'm responsible for the grades. but it will be separate by GSI. So I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. Well, before I get into that, so you can kind of see the sense. This class also has a stricter grade distribution than most classes you're perhaps accustomed to. Each GSI will give 25% of their students A's of some kind, 35% B's of some kind, and the remainder C's and below. So the median grade is a low B, essentially, in this class. The reason we do this is a departmental regulation. It's not a regulation because faculty are individually responsible for grades, but it's a recommendation by the department to have this kind of distribution because this class is used to determine who gets into the major, who gets into Haas, and things like that. If everyone made an A and B, then you wouldn't be able to distinguish who should get into the major and stuff. So this is the reason for it, and you should maybe consider this when you're trying to decide whether to take the class. You should also recognize that C is not a bad grade. Everyone thinks you should make high grades as better. A C, the most important thing in college is to figure out what you want to do with your life, at least as far as you can in 4 years. And if you make a C in a class, sometimes that means, well, that's not the route for me. Go somewhere else. Do something else. So it's useful information. You shouldn't see it as a failure. You should see it as a gaining of information about who you are and what you're interested in and what you're good at. So nevertheless, this will be the grade distribution. Now, each GSI then will have their students and will essentially figure out by adding up all the points, what's the top 25%, and give them A's, B's, etc. What this means is that each of you will be graded and in a curve only with other students who are being taught by the same GSI. That's the main reason for this. When I first started teaching this class, I had one grade distribution for the whole class. And then what would happen is some GSIs teach differently than others. Some of them cover different material than others. And the students felt that if they didn't do well, it was their GSI's fault because the GSI wasn't teaching well. This way, everyone within one GSI's teaching mechanism is getting graded equivalently. Okay? So it's much better in that regard. Okay, any issues or questions about the grading? I know I always get questions later because it feels confusing, but it's actually not. Each GSI, it's as if they have their own class. Yeah. Pass, no pass? Participation is not counted towards your grade in any fashion. There's several ways for that, reasons for that. Some of the GSIs asked me about that because they wanted to do that, but I'm actually opposed to it. I think we're providing you here an excellent learning opportunity, but I really do feel each of you can make a choice of taking advantage of it to the extent you want. If you don't want to come to section, you don't want to come to lecture, it's truly your choice. You can probably end up with a C, but I don't want people to have to do anything. This is an opportunity for you to be the best you can be, and you can take advantage of it to the extent that you want. So in that sense, attendance is not graded, and participation in the sense of discussion, I don't like having graded because there's huge cultural differences in how people interact in group situations, and so I don't want those to enter into the grades either. Anything else? Great. Okay, the textbook, I want to talk about this. Textbook is Case, Spare, and Oster, Principles of Economics. You can use either the 9th or the 10th edition. I would encourage you, as budding economists, to find ways to save money on this. The 10th edition costs something like $240. $196 on Amazon. I looked on half.com yesterday, and there were 9th editions available for $38. And they rush mail them to you. I would encourage you to do that. I think the publishers charging these prices is sinful, and we should use our economic clout to avoid paying these prices. All the readings on the syllabus and on the website are given for both the 9th and the 10th editions, so you can use either one. Also, the bookstore has told me that you can rent the book instead of buy it for half price. It's a little less than half price. I give details on the website, and the bookstore has information about it. So you buy it, you can mark in it, you can do whatever you want to, and you return it at the end of the semester, and it's half price. But that's still $115 or something like that. So it's expensive. And what was the? Yeah, slugbooks.com. Slug because of UC Santa Cruz, our compatriot campus. So try to find, if you've already bought the 10th edition, I don't want to make the bookstore mad at me, but you could find one online at $38 and then bring it back, the 10th edition, back to the bookstore. We have a course website. BSpace for this class simply orients you back to this website. It's because I created this website before BSpace existed, and I like the way it displays information better than the BSpace. Each of you will probably also have a BSpace site for your individual sections. Your GSIs will have them. Okay, so we've got our head GSI, we've got our individual GSIs that each of you will have as your individual teacher. We also have an audiovisual crew up here, Ezra and Vivian. You want to wave to them? Hi. This class is being webcast, so a few hours after the lecture, it will be available on webcast.berkeley.com if you want to look at it. This is hopefully only for you to do as a review. As I said before, attendance is always your option. But I really do believe being here in person is part of the experience of being at Berkeley. This is what you're here for. It would be a shame to miss this opportunity of actually having in-class discussions. You could have gone to University of Phoenix if you wanted an online class. So I encourage you to come here, even though you do have the opportunity to watch the webcast later. Also, the vice chair of the department, when I told him I was going to do these webcasts, told me he didn't want me to do it because he thought students would quit coming to lecture. And the compromise we reached is that I told him that I would cut off the webcast if I find that that's starting to happen. So that's happening. So don't worry. Just come to the lecture. Let's see. The lecture slides. Starting next lecture, each lecture is going to have a tremendous number of slides with graphs, and we're going to go through them at a relatively rapid pace. It would be hard to draw them as quickly as we're going to be going through them. It's one advantage of having this electronic process is that you can go through slides and go through a lot of information quickly. I remember when I was a student, everything was drawn, and I got so deadly bored in class, it was unbelievable. And now we go at a much faster, and as a result, all of you people are smarter than we were at your age. It would help if you had hard copies of the slides when you came to lecture. You can get them online. They're online in two different versions, 6 slides per page or 4 slides per page, 2 slides, I think. Or you can get a booklet of all of them. There's 265 pages of slides at Fast Imaging, and it only costs $7. So that's cheaper than if you printed them out yourself. Fast Imaging is on University between Shattuck and Millview. They're 3-hole punched, so if you want to put them in a binder, you can. They don't come that way, so you don't have to pay for the binder if you don't want it. Okay, any questions about the logistics of the class? Be sure to attend section the first week. The first week ends this coming Wednesday, or else you'll be dropped from the class. Other than that, did you have a question? No? Aloha, see you next Wednesday.